audience. So, and then if everybody would just mute their screens. And I'm Gretchen, by the way. I'll be kind of helping throughout the meeting, the forum here. And right now, I'm going to introduce Ed Bixby and let him introduce the Global Green Burial Alliance before we get started. Ed?
Hi, everyone. Welcome today to our monthly forum, Green Burial in the UK, 30 years later. We want to encourage people to become pledge members of the Global Green Burial Alliance so we can unite globally and change by instituting different practices through education and knowledge. And today we have some wonderful people with us that are going to talk a little bit about how things have changed over the last 30 years. This group of individuals, are behind how we got involved in natural burial. The United Kingdom was very instrumental. So welcome, Gretchen.
Muted. Sorry, I was muted. So I'm Gretchen. I'm also with the Global Green Burial Alliance. And I'm admin our Facebook page, so I'm around in cyberspace and stuff. So as we get going in this forum, if you, like I said, just mute your screen. If you have any questions, you can pop them in the chat box and I'll ask our two guests about your questions. And so I'm going to first introduce Patricia Danaher, who's our spotlight person, and she's going to tell us about her project, and then we're going to get into our guests, Rosie and Adam. So I'm just going to read Patricia's bio really quick. So Patricia Danaher is the founder of the Jizo Foundation, which is dedicated to promoting understanding and healing for women and families who have suffered the loss of an infant at birth or before. They aim to offer both ritual and community by lifting the veil of silence and shame that needlessly covers the death of babies before birth. By creating public grieving sites and providing connection to others for support and solace, they will offer comfort, support, and mental health services to those women and families who are mourning tragic loss. So Patricia, would you like to tell us more about Jizo and your project? Where are you?
Sorry, great, here I am. Can everybody see?
Yeah, we got you.
Okay, that's great. Well, thank you all for being here this afternoon, and I'm delighted to have this opportunity to introduce this very beloved Japanese saint or bodhisattva called Jizo, and to tell you a little bit about the work that I'm trying to do in the US to introduce this beloved figure and to try to ameliorate the needless shame that can often accompany the loss of a baby before birth. I was born in Ireland, as probably some of you can tell, and was raised really steeped in ritual practices and ceremonies from both my Catholic background and the paganism that is at the root of the Irish psyche. I've always felt a very close connection to nature and its rhythms, as well as to animals. Ritual is something that has always interested me and something which I came to really appreciate at times when I wasn't part of any religious community. The need for the metaphor of ritual is something hardwired in humans. I believe in its healing power so much that I set up a company called Rituals for the Living, where I sell handmade grief ritual baskets. And I also did my doctoral dissertation on the subject, which I titled The Cry for Ritual. I lived in Japan for several years in my early 20s and grew to love many things about Japanese culture, rituals, and practice. From cherry blossom viewing parties to tea ceremonies, the engagement which the invisible realms, the engagement which the Japanese engage with the ritual, with the invisible realms, is something which goes on a near continuous basis. This is an image of a memorial ground in Japan, honoring babies that died either before birth or shortly after. Infant mortality, as we all know, can happen for many reasons, and sometimes for reasons we are not able to comprehend. But while we are not always able to comprehend it, everybody knows what grief feels like. And these memorial grounds are designed to help the grieving to attend their losses in public through rituals and ceremonies with others. You can see various iterations of these Jizo statues and Jizo standing over them. This mossy figure on the left is an iteration of Jizo that I really love, that I saw in a market square in Osaka. The moss on it is from water being thrown as a prayer or as an offering as people go about their business, buying their groceries, visiting their neighbors. And on the other side, this is an old, very old Jizo memorial ground in Osaka also, around which a modern apartment building has grown up. So the attitude to death in many ways is that it is a part of life, and it is in the market square, and it is in the center of town, and it's, you know, it's close to where people are going about their lives, and not something sort of hidden or forgotten as it often can be in the West, and in particular with this kind of loss. Many people are aware of the struggles that are a sad reality for many in trying to conceive a baby and bring a pregnancy to full term. Figures for miscarriages, unsuccessful IVF, stillbirths, and the like around the world are staggeringly high. According to UNICEF, a stillbirth occurs every 16 seconds somewhere in the world, and that's about 2 million babies annually. In the US, between 15 to 20% of all pregnancies end in miscarriage. Research involving IVF finds that a very large number of harvested eggs harbored chromosome abnormalities, the leading cause of early term miscarriages. Another study found that 22% of all conceptions never even complete implantation. About 31% of pregnancies confirmed after implantation end in miscarriage. Based on this and the other current medical evidence, if you include fertilized eggs that fail to implant along with pregnancies that end in miscarriage, that means around 70 to 75% of all conceptions will end in pregnancy loss. There is a great lack of understanding of the grief associated with this kind of loss. And where people are members of religious communities, there may be some comfort, but in many cases, it's impossible to do a ceremony or a ritual. Where there are remains, hospitals often consider them to be mere medical waste. If parents are given remains, they are often not permitted to bury them in many Christian and Jewish cemeteries. The absence of a way to memorialize the loss of a baby causes all kinds of ongoing problems in individuals, families, and communities, and this really needs to end. I founded the Jizo Foundation in March of 2020, just before the pandemic began. I was engaged in studying for a master's in mythology when I remembered meeting Jizo in Japan many years earlier, and I began introducing this compassionate saint to friends and clients in Southern California and in Ireland. The aim of the foundation is to introduce Jizo rituals to the West, and to begin to bring this kind of unmourned grief out of the darkness and silence to which it has been consigned for way too long in the West. I have also been making and selling Jizo ritual kits for a number of years, and I'm looking at developing a green burial site in the Mojave Desert, which will have a large section for Jizo memorial plots. So the exciting news, the first major Jizo site in the US is going to be unveiled next month with Destination Destiny. Ed Bixby and I are partnering to try to do what we can to introduce this loving and compassionate being to the world, and to try to help us here in the West find ways of managing this kind of grief that usually people really don't have any place to put or no way of talking about it. There are many exciting things that we're doing, but these statues which I commissioned are based on the ones that I use in my small ritual kits. And these were made by an artist, a Mexican artist here in Southern California. And our hope is that, you know, in the coming years, these will begin to appear in many, many different cemeteries in the US and around the world. And that these practices, particularly for this kind of loss, you know, can begin to be integrated into into how we tend to grief overall. So I'd be delighted to speak to anybody offline about partnering or about consulting in any way to try to add this to what you're already offering. And I just wanted to show you very quickly, I mentioned how Jizo is also a protector of animals. This is an example of one of these handmade kits that I've been making for a number of years. I'm very proud of them. They're quite popular. People don't know what to say, and sometimes a little box like this can really help. So these are examples of these handmade statues of this benevolent figure. You can see very, very tender, and the boxes contain everything that's needed to create a shrine at home. And then of course you can add different things. It's hard to mourn somebody you haven't met in the flesh, so to speak, but the ritual, or the metaphor of ritual, I think is very healing. So here's a little of my contact information, and I'm glad to take any questions.
Well, thank you, Patricia. I'd like to say to the group that, you know, from experience, I do understand that this is going to be something that's going to be very special for people who need that place, that special place to be able to find solace, because there is no closure in a loss like this. And the irony of the situation is the reason I'm in the cemetery and the death and dying business is because of my infant brother who had passed away, and my mother didn't have any opportunity to even see him buried or anything else. And that was something she carried, and she still carries. So I feel like what Patricia is doing really should be embraced, and anyone on this call or anyone with interest, please contact her to create these sites, because they're vitally important. You know, you're not alone in this, and I think this is going to be something that people really appreciate.
Yeah, and it's true. It's sad because there's not specially designated areas, really. I mean, I've had a couple friends who lost babies, and it's horrible for them what they go through, and not having a spot like that, or you know, something like Jizo to help it's going to be great.
I will add, if I may, there's I recall probably 15, 20 years ago, a very large spin-off of a part of a cemetery, one of the largest in Sydney, that had a designated area to stillborns. And I'll do some digging and research. It was a very nice sandstone memorial and gardens, primarily for stillborn births, because there wasn't anything. So maybe we were ahead of that curve a little here in Australia as well. But I'll do some Googling and checking. I'm sure it was at, not Rookwood, the other one down in near La Perouse in Sydney. But I'll dig it up. It might be very interesting to share, and I'm sure Patricia would like to see it. But it was a real Aussie theme, not the Japanese theme, but a beautiful sandstone major memorial to mothers and their children, unborn children. So yeah, good stuff.
Yeah. Rosie?
Can I interject there? One of our natural burial grounds in the Midlands has, for several years now, pioneered an arrangement with one of the local maternity hospitals, and they now offer young couples or mums the opportunity to bury their babies' remains with others who've lost that month, and they're all buried together, and then they have a communal tree, and that's working really well. So I think things are changing.
Great.
If I may, also, I had a relative that did lose almost a full-term baby, shattering, but that baby ended up in a traditional grave in a cemetery. You know, so it was just another part of the adult cemetery, for want of a better. There was no specific garden area memorial to that unborn child. So very interesting, very interesting. So thanks, Patricia, for what you're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Hopefully we'll get you some more connections to cemeteries and things.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
There's one thing I have noticed, you know, it does vary, of course, in different places. I came across a mass grave in Dublin a few months ago, and while it's better than nothing, it's still like a mass grave is, you know, what comfort is there to visit a mass grave, really? I know it's better than nothing, but I think we can do better. There can be beauty, and there can be, you know, some harmony, some way to tend that's not about money or, you know, doesn't require permission.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Rosie?
Well, the one thing,
Oh,
Go ahead.
sorry.
the one thing that I was going to say is, just for everyone, you know, on this call and who watches it, is that, you know, cemeteries are designed for the living, because that's a place to remember our loved ones. It certainly is the final resting place of those individuals, but they don't always have to be there to be memorialized. So that's important to know, that you can create that special space and still, you know, have time with that person, and they don't have to physically be there.
Rosie?
I don't know if another thing that's starting to happen here more commonly is available or possible in the States or down under, but preterm 24-week babies, a lot of couples are actually now taking the bodies home, having a home burial, or more commonly, because they don't want to actually be fixed to one particular spot because they're young couples, they might be moving around. They're actually burying the remains of their babies in large plant pots and planting a bush or a shrub, and then having that, and that's something they can take with them if they move house in the future. So I don't know if that's legal in the States, but that's happening here.
Wow. And they're not cremated either? They're just, wow.
24 weeks. So what's the gestation period? 40. So 24, what is that? It's just like probably 4 or 5 inches, like a little tiny little animal of sort.
Yeah.
So before up to 24 weeks, you don't have to register the death. The baby is not classified as a baby in the UK, which again is something that young couples and mums find really upsetting. That it's just what do they term it horribly? The products of conception.
Oh, wow.
Well, if anyone would like to know more, please contact Patricia. It's a wonderful program, and we hope to help her grow it. That's for sure.
Yep. Thanks, Patricia.
Thank you all.
Okay, so I'm going to introduce Rosie and Adam. So I'll read both of their bios and then we'll start talking. So let's see. Rosie Inman, right? Inman, do I got that right?
Inman.
Okay. Rosie started burying folks in shallow woodland graves at the end of the last century. 25 years on now, she manages the Association of Natural Burial Ground, ANGB, a friendly, mutually supportive offshoot of the Natural Death Center charity. She also manages the NDC Natural Death Center too, and her days are taken up answering the charity's public telephone and email helpline. This means she's acquainted with all sorts of death-related queries and issues, not just green questions. The ANBG is the only organization scrutinizing the eco cemeteries in the UK. They have a unique feedback system that members are required to comply with. At any one time, they have several provisional members. They offer as much advice as is needed for landowners and those interested in operating their own cemetery sites. And I popped her link in the chat if anybody wants to check it out, which I recommend because it's a great website with a lot of information. Let's see. So then we have Adam Masters. He is currently the managing director for Tributes Ltd, who supplies high quality products to the funeral industry. They're a family company, so they understand the need and culture of small businesses whilst having the infrastructure to serve companies and groups. They supply exclusively for the funeral trade. Tribute specializes in woven coffins and ashes caskets in natural willow and bamboo, and are the originators of the popular scatter tubes, which were created by them to be an alternative to the ubiquitous plastic return containers. Adam is also part of several funeral associations and keeps his finger on the pulse of natural burial and what's happening in the funeral industry within the UK and beyond. And I also put his links in the chat. So hello, you guys. Thank you for being in our forum.
Thank you for having us.
Hey.
So I was gonna kind of start with Rosie, and then just let Adam, as she goes along, chime in where you have things to say, and then we'll kind of get into Adam what you do. So so Rosie, I noticed from being online that there's a lot of green burial cemeteries in the UK now, which is wonderful. So my question to you is, so how is how is it for the public? Like, does most of the British population see green burial as a regular option with everything else now?
Unfortunately not. It's better than it used to be when I started back in the day. I'd go to parties and people would ask me what I did, and I'd tell them, you know, I bury people in shallow graves in the woods and plant trees on top of them. And they think that maybe this was well, question whether it was legal, and most people had just thought I was barking mad, I think, probably. Now, if I tell people, most people will say, I know somebody whose dad was buried in one of those sites or something. So, although yesterday I was speaking to a young journalist who phoned me up about something, and he was a youngster, he sounded about 25, I suppose, never heard of it, which I was very surprised about. So it's still a bit of a mixed bag. People who attend natural burial grounds, that is the biggest way in which they find out about it, by actually attending a funeral and being blown away by it. And the normal reaction for most people is to say, I didn't know what to expect. This is a breath of fresh air, literally. And are there any leaflets, please? The biggest problem we've got with the movement and the number of the percentage of people having a green burial, the problem with the growth of that is actually the funeral industry themselves. Funeral directors hate it. It takes too long. They prefer a nice, quick, regimented turnaround at the crematorium. They can get more funerals in the day with the same group of pallbearers and the same vehicles. That applies mostly to the large groups that are sharing vehicles and men, and it's all a big strategic planning thing on the whiteboards. For the small independent funeral directors who maybe only do 2 or 3 funerals a week, it's a pleasure to go out and spend an afternoon with the family, traveling maybe a little bit further than the crematorium, and you know, they're not twiddling their thumbs looking at their watches hoping the family would shut up and get on because they've got a 3 o'clock one to pick up. So that, and I from the north of Scotland to the tip of Cornwall, this is what I'm hearing from my members, is that they'll show families around who've just lost somebody. The families will be really keen. They say it's perfect for mum. Can we have the plot over near the fence where the horses are in the next field, because she was really into horses and ponies. And they go off then to see the funeral director, never to be seen again. And that happens all the time, because the funeral director will sit and go, oh, it's a bit bleak out there this time of year. All your family and the visitors will be far more comfortable at the crematorium.
Interesting. I mean, I find that seems very similar to some of the reaction you get here in the United States. But Rosie, in your opinion, is it because the funeral director needs to be educated as to how they serve a family and profit from a natural burial, or is it just the fact that they are just they don't see the benefits of it? What is your opinion concerning that?
In general, a lot of them are just lazy.
Right.
Sorry, you know, I just hear.
Sorry, all the big groups are crunching the numbers, aren't they? They're all about maximizing their profits, and you know, cremation still accounts for 50% in the UK, with burial around about 25%. I don't know what the figure of that is green burials, Rosie, but yeah, it's but more and more now, as we're seeing in all cultures are all different demographics around the world, that, you know, the younger population are far more environmentally aware and consider sustainability and their choice of a funeral and the impact of that funeral. There is a lot more consideration around that now, and I think, you know, some of the stats in the Mintel report that I was referring to, I think it's 37% of all adults would choose a coffin that's made of sustainable materials, and then it goes on to say that younger adults are more likely to choose a green burial site.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's been the case with research and studies for at least 2 decades. That, you know, they'll present to over 65s even their options, including a natural burial, and explain to them what there's, and a huge percentage choose it. But then in reality, only a tiny percentage actually have it and get it. And it's 2 things. It's people not discussing what they want, not telling and empowering their families, and then it's their families then getting bullied by funeral directors who want to sell them what they want them to have. So a family who, or an individual who wants a natural burial, absolutely need to dig their feet in. And if the funeral director starts showing any resistance, they need to have the gumption and the strength to jump ship and go say, right, well, if you're not happy to help us, we'll go elsewhere. But people don't. We know when people are shocked and bereft, they're just easily steered and shoehorned into what the individual in front of them, who's oh so sincere and professional, wants to sell them.
Yeah. Is there, does the UK have death doulas there?
Yes, a few, yes. It's something the public would in general not know about, though.
Right. What about the younger generation of funeral directors? I noticed from the conventions here, like when I had the booth, the younger funeral directors that, you know, just got done with schooling and stuff like that, they were very interested in it. Do you have that same interest with the younger people getting into the profession?
I haven't noticed any change in that direction at all. The problem with the funeral director training is that they get trained by the fossils to be new fossils.
Right. Good way to put it.
Adam, can I ask you this? I mean, from your perspective, because you deal with the providers quite often, I'm sure, when it comes to products, have they shared any of their viewpoints? Do you think that the hesitation would be not knowing how to make this profitable for their funeral home? Or is it more that maybe they're just not comfortable with the process itself?
I don't think it's that they're not comfortable with the process. Most of the sort of association conferences that I've been to, the natural burial tends not to be on the agenda, and I think that's a telling story. It's all about, you know, what happened during COVID, CMA investigation and new regulations coming in, the impact of direct cremations on the traditional funeral, and how much that's potentially hidden their pockets, and how they've had to adjust their offerings to provide simple or direct cremations. What I would say is and backs up what Rosie said, is the independent funeral directors, you know, of which there's a, you know, very, very high percentage, 66% of funeral homes in the UK are essentially independent, small outfits. They're the ones that will give the attention to the bereaved family and more than likely carry out their wishes. And I suspect a lot of them do have good relationships with their local green burial sites.
Yeah, Rosie.
I'm good.
In practice, what happens is that most of our members discover as the years roll on that they've got 2 or 3 what we refer to, not animals, but pet funeral directors. It's a scratchy back situation. So the families that go to see the burial site first will ask for a reference for a good funeral director who will support them. And so the funeral director and the natural burial ground managers know who to recommend. And similarly, those funeral directors will bring them a lot of work. So they do a vast high percentage with just a few few funeral directors out of maybe 50 within reach of their burial ground.
I have a lovely customer, Rosie, lady called Penny Lally down in Penwith, where she has a pet crematorium, and she has some lovely fields. And although traditionally she started off as a pet crematorium, she then opened up a natural burial ground. And I'm not sure whether others do it, but there's pets and owners buried together in her burial ground, and I think that's a lovely idea as well.
Love that. Yeah, that's a great idea. So in those, I've been to England a few times, and they have the churches with the churchyard cemetery. Do they allow green burials in those? I'm just curious.
Yeah, there's approximately, although I've lost count now, there's at least 150 what we refer to as hybrid cemeteries, which are either Church of England or more usually local authority cemeteries that have decided that they need to offer something like this, and they've got a natural burial corner somewhere. In general, like I can probably count on only one hand the number are actually making a success of it, because they aren't, the groundsmen don't get it, because they try to operate them in the same way they do their regular cemetery, i.e. the cemetery clerk never meets the families. They just liaise between the gravedigger and the funeral director, and they just do the paperwork in an office. And as we know as natural burial ground managers here, it is absolutely vital that the manager meets every single family before a funeral, just to make sure through their grief and the fact they haven't read the literature, they understand they can't put grief litter on the ground. They can't have a memorial stone. They can't have a sunken vase in the ground that will drown all the invertebrates, and they can't do all these things. Regular cemetery clerks and regular cemeteries never meet the families before funerals. So there's and consequently there's a breakdown in communication. They're not what people expect when they go to have a look at what the local authority is offering, and there's no interpretation, and they fail.
Can I share something that I think is interesting? And I'm curious from the both of you, Adam and Rosie, if you can answer this question. So here in the United States, a direct cremation is, you can get it rather reasonably. So what's really helped us grow natural burial is the fact that you're bringing the family back to the funeral home for a service, opposed to like a direct cremation. What is the are burial costs similar to cremation cost? I would imagine cremation is certainly much cheaper, but at the same time, how does a natural burial compare to a cremation?
Okay, well, it varies enormously. Sites that are run by corporate, have been set up by corporate financial investors, tend to be very expensive and be on a par with local authority cemetery prices, especially in urban areas. Astronomical in London, Manchester, any of the big cities. Rural local authority sites in villages out in the countryside and in churchyards, if there's still space, most churchyards are full, it's very cheap to be buried. My average member at the moment, the average cost for a single plot is about £800. And on top of that, there's the digging and the administration fee. So they average out at about £1,200. And there are some crematoria now that are £1,000, £1,100. So it's pretty similar. What I think is really important to stress to people who are being sold a cremation is that you actually end up paying twice, because you've got, you're being told, oh, well, it's X for a cremation, Y for a burial. But then 2 weeks after you've done the cremation and you've said goodbye and the curtains have closed and it's all done, here's your mum back in a different format, and you've got to get rid of her all over again. So then they land up having to go and buy a plot, and then they feel they have to have a stone. So they're paying twice. So actually it's faff and disruptive and more expensive potentially.
Right.
And that's something that worries me about these other new fangled offerings with resummation and the composting. It's the same thing. You're going to be offered back your
You load
loved
of
one.
soil to get rid of, where you're going to dump it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, that's 100% true. I mean, with natural organic reduction, you still you still need cemetery services. Adam, so as far as tributes is concerned, I would assume then the majority of what you see are like eco-friendly, like cremation products, or how are you doing with the burial products themselves?
Yeah, so we we tend not to do too much other than our range of coffins. So we do obviously hand woven coffins, and they can be used for cremation, for traditional burial, or for green burial. Our business started 30 years ago, providing small ashes caskets to pet crematoria. So our business grew out of the rising industry of pet cremation, and then I feel a little bit of imposter in this meeting, based on lots of others' experience in the deaf industry. I've only been in it for 10 years. My next door neighbour, but one, owns the company that I run, and a story of how the scatter tube started is that Richard Bush got his sister's ashes back after a cremation, in what looks like, we call it a polytainer. It's an old sort of plastic sweet jar looking thing. And he thought there must be something better and more environmentally friendly as receiving ashes back, and that they intended to scatter his sister's ashes, and that brought rise to the idea of the scatter tube. So most of what we supply in the UK and throughout Europe is related to ashes. So that's just the fact that it's such a big industry over here, and I know Rosie would want me to be selling less and less of those products because more people are buried in natural burial grounds, and I do not disagree with that, because I think it's a wonderful part of our industry.
But you know what, Adam, though, I want to stress the fact that you are using environmentally sustainable products, and everything makes a difference. And what I really would like to see is, as people still choose traditional funeral service, that they're choosing more non-traditional products, because every little bit does help. Unfortunately, so you can't change the world in a day, but you can change it over time. So we do appreciate what Tributes does contribute.
Thank you. Exactly. And there is much more of a conscience process. Everybody now, I'm generalizing a lot, but I would assume that the actual topic of sustainability and knowing what you're buying in any aspect of your life, whether you're buying a car, a phone, or whatever it may be, discussions around funerals have come on a long way with regards to the sustainability, credibility of whatever you're using in that funeral, whether it be a hybrid hearse or a fully electric hearse, to the choice of coffin being a more environmentally friendly coffin, and then choosing what you'd want to put your ashes back in after deciding what you intend to do with the ashes. So we're seeing it a lot more. A lot of the corporates that we supply, so we supply the Dignities and the Co-ops, that are the two largest corporate groups in the UK. They are generally looking at sustainability and really pushing down their supply chain, the credibility of their suppliers and the products that they buy. I've committed with our company to have full life cycle assessments on all of my products by the end of 2024, so I can tell everybody that's buying our products what that carbon footprint of that particular product is, and you can call it cradle to gate and then cradle to grave. Cradle to gate is when the carbon impact of getting that product into my warehouse, and the cradle to grave is the impact of that then being used in a funeral service.
Very clever. I like that, to give people an idea of what the breakdown is over time. I was in the water tank game for many years, and we would be proud to say the plastic tank has a half-life span of 50 years. It'll see you off the earth. It's just amazing where I sit down today and you hear myself say that 15 years ago, where the whole market's changed for not about longevity with plastic, but I'm now in this whole eco-friendly world, and it's about biodegradable now. It's amazing.
The other thing I think that really affects the natural burial grounds is just the amount of money that is spent by funeral organisations in promoting their services, but whether it be the corporates. And you know, that's a lot of resource and a lot of money that goes into advertising and getting those families through their funeral home doors. And you know, natural burial grounds don't have that amount of finance, and I'm sure you're probably much more qualified than me, Rosie, to talk about that.
I have a quick question, if I may ask Adam and Rosie. Is there, it strikes me as I sit back and look, and I can't find any stats on it, but when people are opting for a green burial, there's those that want a woven casket or a nice send off, and then those who just want to, there's the just cremate me mob, and they're over there, right? So we're talking green burial, but many go for casket versus just a basic shroud. Is there any stats where people go, look, the shroud's fine, I don't need a casket? Or I'm just interested because others would say, I think Elizabeth mentioned that up her way, some people like the idea of their own blanket. You know, they don't need a casket, they don't want that at all. So I'm trying to get my head around the fact a casket's, whilst they're not outright required, I mean, I think there's probably a better market, I hate to say it, from a sales point of view, respectfully and honestly. Shrouds are fine, they'll just do. You don't need a casket, you don't need to spend $600,000, $2,500 on any casket. It's an option, and they're nice options. But Ed and I are working, if I may, on with Virginia, who's joined us, on a special development as part of that shroud market, because I see the shroud a huge take from caskets. I really do. You know, what are your thoughts there, if I may, Adam and Rosie?
Yeah, I'll go on that. I mean, there's just a couple of main shroud producers in the UK. There are some other very artistic ones as well, but there is no requirement for burial for a coffin, unless you want to go into a certain London cemetery in Camden who've been refusing to use shrouds and refusing to accept them, which has been upsetting a lot of families. It's a minority sport. Not many people have thought about it, so they've got their work cut out actually selling their shrouds, although they're very beautiful and they're very easy. And I've buried people who, as you say, have just been wrapped in their eiderdown or their back blanket, and it's been very straightforward. You know, we've used, instead of straps and a board, we've just laid a larger blanket or counterpane on the ground next to the grave, laid the body in the middle of that. The pallbearer family have then picked up the corners of the blanket, twisted it into a rope in effect, and then walked over the grave and lowered and then folded that other blanket over the top.
Very interesting.
Easy.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's been discussed recently, you know, and an upmarket version of that. So,
Rosie, if I could ask you, and you, Adam, you may know, so how does the UK look at natural burial or these types of facilities as a conservation tool? Is that being practiced at all in the United Kingdom as far as protecting, say, you know, spaces by introducing this? Has anyone given that any thought?
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of our requirements for our members, that they have to manage their land to the benefit of wildlife, and the whole idea is that they would be set up as they are being set up as nature reserves and a permanent green space for the protection of wildlife. I know in America you call them preserves, but over here, as a translation thing, a preserve is jam in a jar.
Yeah. Yeah.
Correct.
True. Huh. I have a question. This might be a little bit off subject, but I got asked this a lot before about grave reuse. What is that like over there?
Okay, well, there's one, as far as I'm aware, there's only one cemetery in the country, and that's the City of London Cemetery in the East End of London, that has got permission to do this. It is quite extraordinary. I've been and had a look at it. So you've got this acres and acres of lichen covered grey weathered stones, And then like little beacons of whiteness, every sort of few meters, there will be a glistening white one. And what they've done is they've got a lift and lower sort of policy. And they turn the original Victorian gravestones, they clean them up, they turn them round, and they put the new occupants' details on the other side of the gravestone. It's really sensible, but I don't, it's not my area of expertise. I don't know what the legal, I know that the Law Commission and the Ministry of Justice are looking at extending, maybe Adam knows, extending the possibility for different authorities to try it. I know they have to, the lease has to have expired, and they need to be shown to have made all efforts to contact any descendants, give them the opportunity to repurchase the right of burial. But otherwise, they're then going down any bones they find, they're then collecting together and putting in a little deeper section and then burying on top. I mean, this whole sacrosanct thing about graves being yours forever is egotistical and ridiculous, really. I mean, before Georgian and Victorian times, when they introduced much more fancy stone memorials, you basically went in the graveyard. 50 years later, the sexton and the clergyman had changed, and that bit of the graveyard looked as if it hadn't been touched for years. They'd go down, and if they found long bones and skulls, they'd take them out and they'd put them in the ossuary or charnel house. But then once these, you know, the snobbery of the stone memorial came in, and they've got a problem, haven't they?
Yeah, I've got more money than you. Look at the size of my mausoleum or my family. Yeah. Hey, quick question there, if I may, because we spoke down here in Australia a lot some years ago about a 25-year tenure, and there'd be a term, and after 25 years, the hole gets open and somebody else goes in, and there was a lot of kickback emotionally about it. So people, you know, but I was just thinking then about vertical burials, and we've all heard and seen little snippets about horizontal, right? And I know that, I think from what I understand via Ed with the green burial movement, it's a hole dug by hand. Well, it's very hard to dig a 6, 7 foot, 8 foot, 9 foot deep tunnel down. Let's just say, Ed, question without notice, is it all about a machine operating and running petrol and gasoline or diesel? Or let's just say you had an auger driven by battery solar powered, and you dug down. That's not a machine that aids the grave digger, but it's not a machine using fossil fuels. Could that be seen to come in at times?
Yeah,
Well,
I get that asked this a lot, and it is about the depth and the safety. As you say, you know, the average coffin 6.5, 7 foot. You know, you've then got to have 2 foot minimum of covering at a natural burial ground, 3.5 foot in a local authority cemetery. That's a hell of a deep hole. That's very dangerous. But the auger, I love your solar powered auger idea. That's wonderful.
So long as it's solar powered, you know what I mean? Okay, and then
bring that to market, Mark.
12 feet and drill a hole and just drop it. What's the difference? What is the difference?
Well, what you have to understand, though, Mark, is every facility is a little different. So if you're in a very environmentally sensitive area, there is a difference between what we would call here in the United States the preserve, which would be the JM cemetery.
Strawberry, please.
And then the hybrid. So in the hybrid situation, it's actually perfectly fine to use machinery. Typically in the conservation or natural burial grounds, it's so environmentally sensitive that you don't want to introduce any heavy equipment. If there was something that, you know, could be used that would be less impactful, that would be perfectly fine. What question I would like to ask, you know, is that we have, you know, looked to the United Kingdom for the last 25 years here in the United States as the leaders, you know, in natural burial, meaning that, you know, you guys were doing it before us, and you gave us a lot of inspiration. We've grown tremendously here in the United States, you know, in the last 17 years that I've been involved in offering services to families. What is your opinion of the United States, Rosie and Adam, concerning if you know anything about what we do? What are your thoughts?
Steve, you stole everything from the motherland.
I'll go on that. One of the things that I have to confess I've struggled with for the last sort of 25 years has been cultural misappropriation, and also the how can I politely put it, the new age claptrap that that really has caused us here a lot of trouble from the beginning. And I've said this again and again to people in the States, and I know I've upset a lot of people, but when we were starting up in the first few years, there was this a few people who were doing it were a bit out there, and they'd got in the press and on the news, and the members of the public who had learned about natural burial associated it with burial for tree hugging pagan hippies. Yeah. And so therefore my advice has always been, whatever PR you do, whatever you know, try and be as straight and normal as you possibly can, because otherwise you're going to set yourself up for years of establishing a reputation for being inappropriate for Joe Blogs.
Yep, that's why I did not go to the ICCFA in Bergenstocks and a prairie skirt.
Well, and you know, for us practicing this in the United States, and I'd be interested to know from you, Adam and Rosie, believe it or not, people believe or want to believe that my customers are environmentalists, or they're tree huggers or hippies or whatever you want to call them. But they're just everyday people who really don't want the invasiveness of embalming, and they don't want to be cremated, and they want the memorialization and celebration. Is that what you see in the United Kingdom as well?
Absolutely. I think, I mean, at my first site, before I left that and took over managing the charity, I'd buried in excess of 500 people, and I could count on, well, I think 3 burials that were basically a bit wacky. One was a pagan who wanted to bless the grave with milk and salt and do all that sort of stuff. And there was one guy who sat there and played the didgeridoo to his father, you know, and it was all a bit it took ages. The rest, yes, absolutely. So I quite often get asked by the press, who are the people who are being buried in these sites? And they will generally fall into the brackets of their bird watchers, their ramblers, their keen gardeners. They're people with an interest in the environment in one way or another, but they're just regular people.
Absolutely. Well, you look at Ed, he flies across the country every 2 weeks on his G5 blowing exhaust out, you know, of the jet engines. So, you know, it's something I'd like to ask you folk of the green burial movement, and excuse me if the question is out of order, but and I don't mean to catch anyone, but you often read about traditional cemeteries using groundbreaking radar to source different people over time if something's gone wrong with the layout and the planning. And in a traditional cemetery, it tends to be, you know, 6 or 7 foot long, 3 or 4 feet wide, then the next one, then the next one, then the next one. But in green, it strikes me as if it could be any angle, anywhere, anyone. How do you, and maybe I'm naive here, so excuse the question, how do you know, even from a marker that could be moved, right, gently, like a couple of feet, someone might be naughty and move Fred Smith's marker over there or whatever. How do you keep a history, for want of a better, where someone wants to know exactly where Uncle Ed's buried?
Yeah, it's absolutely a legal requirement that we keep track of who's where.
Yes. Oh, I'm sure, but how? Yeah.
A lot of the sites think it would be great to use GPS and things like that, but basically it's to date, as far as I'm aware, unless you get a really expensive military package, it's not accurate enough. And I like to say that my members can find the corner of a plot to within 5 centimeters or 2 inches.
Well done.
We use I absolutely recommend a simple trigonometry system with permanent markers. We use a lot of the sites use barbed stakes that are about 2 foot long, metal with a flat cap, so they're not a trip hazard above ground. and they're put in position by a land surveyor who put in on maybe a 10 or 12 meter gridding system. So each plot you just measure to three points, and yes, they're all generally orientated east-west in a traditional Christian manner because it makes it easy. But if the lay of the land is, if the fall of the hill's going the other way and people expect the head to be uphill and the feet downhill, then you'll shift everything round a few degrees. So, and as part of our membership of our 70 or so sites, I go round and I check that they have competent systems that are intelligible and will be, I insist that all our members have a how-to file so that if they drop dead, that somebody can pick up the pieces, find out exactly who's buried where, and and who's got outstanding rights and who's so
good. I would have expected so, but thank you. And sorry for the question. I'm not questioning you. I needed to understand myself because it just struck me because it's so native looking after that. How do you find them? Are they there or over? You know?
It's the old-fashioned way, Mark. You have to survey it.
Okay.
So
Adam had a question.
Go ahead, Adam.
I was just going to ask Rosie whether there's many instances amongst your members whereby there's not enough research being done on the coffin material, and a coffin's been chosen that's just not suitable for a natural burial ground. I don't know whether you get many instances of that, or whether you're through the arrangement of the funeral, you've already weeded that out in terms of only ensuring there is an appropriate coffin.
Yeah, my members try really hard to make sure that the families understand it and that they ensure that the funeral director isn't pulling the wool over their eyes. Fairly frequently, once every few months, I'll get an irate member phoning up saying, "A bloody funeral director's gone and provided," and obviously it's there on the day in front of 60 people. You can't say, no, you're going to have to take it home and change and come back again. So and they regularly query new products that come on the market, and they're saying, I looked at it and I reckon it's got an MDF or a chipboard bottom to it or whatever. So we have to trust the funeral directors that they're being honest and straight, and for the most part they are, and they play the game and they know what we require. But
thank you.
Gretchen, do we have any questions in the chat room for Adam or Rosie?
Yeah, there was a couple. There was one, Rich wanted to know if the burying depth is the same as here, that you bury your natural burials are 3.5 feet. Yeah.
No, not at all. The Ministry of Justice has produced a document that's given us guidance, not requirement, but guidance that a covering of 2 foot. So the idea is that we bury as shallowly as possible because there's more oxygen available. It's an aerobic decomposition rather than an anaerobic. The deeper you go, the worse it is, and the goodness in your body is lost. So there is technically in the UK no minimum depth for burial. We could bury at ground level and risk animal interference. Some local authorities do bury at ground surface, but then they put a concrete top on it.
Here's your reminder. Take ibuprofen.
Sort of beats the green burial, doesn't it?
Alexa, stop. Gretchen, here is your reminder. Take ibuprofen.
Hi, Alexa.
Was there any other questions? Gretchen, was there any other in the chat?
I have a question for Rosie, if I may. Those beautiful doors behind you, is that the drop it to the fort, the moat? Is that the ramp across the moat, or what is that? That's gorgeous.
That's my bedroom door, and actually, if he's any louder, you'll actually hear my husband snoring from the other side because you can hear him.
There was just one question from Dale, who left the meeting. She had to run. Is more of a comment. She didn't realize that people bury urns. She has all hers on her dresser, her 4 cats and her mom, I think. Yeah.
Well, Adam could tell her all about the that, right, Adam?
I'll tell her when I see her.
Well, we actually have a product that we developed from feedback from a funeral director, and it was for people that wanted to bury their loved ones' ashes in their gardens. And so we come up with a product, and we called it the High Down, because it can be above ground and below ground. And essentially,
it looks awfully like the everlasting urn between.
it looks nothing like it. Looks nothing like it.
Can I show you this ring that I'm wearing actually contains some of the ashes of my late husband, and also the earrings. So there's beautiful things that can be done. I made this little paperweight. There's really nice things that you could do rather than just that urn that gets moved around.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or plant a tree. Is that happening in the United Kingdom? Are people planting the tree? Oh, that's great.
That's a very popular choice.
Very good. Well, I don't know what time we have here, Gretchen.
Yeah,
what time?
Well, we're about done now. It's 5:02, so we can stop because it's an hour long. But this was a really great conversation.
Very
Enjoyed
informative,
It really was. We really appreciate the insight, and we want to welcome anyone in the United Kingdom or anyone globally to be a member and become part of the conversation. I want to thank you, Adam, and Tributes for you being here today. I want to thank you, Rosie, Patricia. It's been a wonderful conversation, and let's collaborate and let's continue to educate together and grow this movement. Yeah, if you guys ever need us, reach out. We're here. And thank you.
We should do it again. Can we do it again?
Yeah, definitely.
I got to say that the doors are 400 years old, approximately. They came from the Jewish section of Cordoba in Spain, and I found them on eBay.
Wow,
on
that's
eBay?
awesome.
They're beautiful. They are.
Awesome.
It was a fortune. So I could see somebody departing with 10 grand for something like that as a feat. Ed's your man. If you ever got a sale, Ed could buy that in a heartbeat. All right, let's go. Hey, Adam, thanks so much for joining. It was really
lovely to meet everybody.
Maybe each you can
Thank
join
you,
us
Patricia.
Thank you all.
Great to meet you all. Thank you.
And Virginia. Thank you, Virginia.
Lovely to meet you all. Thank you for having us.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye. Bye.